Hey guys, this is Yoda. So Blizzard recently just dropped some patch tuning on us. I did not expect this to happen since I kind of expected it a couple days ago if it was going to happen, but here we are. So the first thing that happened is the DPS DK got 5% buffed. Frost DK is looking really good right now. I'd say they are a little bit dependent on Shaman buff being in the key, but if there is a Shaman buff, they are looking pretty good. Eldrazi DH got some massive nerfs, or quote-unquote nerfs, I guess. This bug fix that we kind of knew was happening. The Wounded Quarry no longer double dips with Thrill of the Fight or Havoc Mastery. This is a much bigger deal for Havoc than it is for Vengeance. So for Havoc, it's roughly a 50 to 60% nerf to Wounded Quarry, which is like a 7% nerf for their overall. For Vengeance, this is more like a 2%-ish PS nerf and 20% to Wounded Quarry. As far as is Havoc actually meta right now, so we'll go to some logs here. This is the overall for the key, so it's not that good on overall, and it's getting nerfed. However, if you look at priority damage, Consuming Bloodstone is a priority mob. They're gapping like crazy with the Wounded Quarry bug. Wounded Quarry bug is responsible for maybe 60 million of his Wounded Quarry damage. As you can see, he did 115 total. So even if you cut off 60 million here, he still did 300 million, and everyone else did 250, including me. I mean, the highest did 250, and I also did 250. So, in my opinion, it's still going to be one of the best priority classes, if not the best priority damage class in the game. However, overall, it might not be good. Still, I think it's still a very good class to bring. Priority damage is very valuable in Mythic Plus. We also got a small buff to Feral. The tier set, in particular, is getting a massive buff. This is really good. This, in combination with another change we'll see earlier, means I think a lot of feral druids may see play in higher keys. A really good uncapped AoE, and they also have really good funnel. Now that the playstyle is around spamming bites and just keeping up rips rather than like spamming rips for rip and wounds as it was in Dragonflight. Guardian Druid gets a pretty big damage buff. However, I don't think, initial read, this is not enough to bring Guardian in line with other tanks damage-wise, unless you play some like paper glass cannon build. So in my opinion, Guardian is going to be a little bit stronger than it was, but still not top of the pack in my opinion. Biggest change of the patch is that Aug is now dead. As far as I understand, Aug was already doing pretty low on logs, and this basically just seals the deal. Aug is completely out. At the start of War Within at Season 2 PTR, there was a change where Augmentation Evoker no longer buffs tanks and healers. So after that change, I said Aug is vulnerable to tuning. If they get tuned low, then they're out, and now they're tuned low, so they're out. Dev Evoker, I actually haven't seen anyone really play seriously in the last, a few years, other than a brief cameo in Dragonflight Season 4. Ever since Aug came out, this has basically been dead. We'll see if they actually come back for the new season. I don't think this is going to be enough. I think they're pretty heavily undertuned, but we'll see. BM Hunter, Season 8% nerf. MM Hunter, small buff. I don't really know how strong MM Hunter is because literally no one has even tried to play it, at least in my keys. BM Hunter is obviously going to be about 8% weaker. One of the biggest things that was like putting them high in the meta or your list is that they were doing high overall damage, so I'd say they're definitely a little bit weaker now. HPAL, 4% healing increase. I think this class probably needs more than an aura buff, probably some sort of rework in the talent tree, but here we are. So Priest, these are pretty massive changes here. Void Weaver, Void Race cooldown has been increased to 3 minutes, now matching Shadow Fiend's cooldown. So there is some speculation. I don't believe we will know until Tuesday, unless they push the change to PTR sooner than that. There is some speculation that this will make Mindbender's cooldown longer than 30 seconds. If that happens, then it is over. For Disc Priest, they're going to be like, I would say, definitely not the best healer, but probably still playable. Which is probably where Blizzard wants it, honestly. This is the biggest change. I think this is roughly 5 to 10% damage and healing, and it's way more than that when they're actually in cooldowns. So Disc Priest, I think if this is the only change that is affecting Disc Priest, I think it'll be like okay still. If this, and probably still best, if this also makes Mindbender's cooldown longer than 30 seconds, then it's over, I think, for Disc Priest meta. Alright, Shadow. All damage increased by 13%, but tier set massively nerfed. What I understand, this is net neutral on single target, but it is a pretty small gain on AoE, like a very small gain on AoE. So not really the biggest change. If Disc Priest is out, then Shadow Priest stonks are definitely up. Also with Aug out, all DPS stonks are up since Aug was basically going to take a DPS spot, and now it almost certainly will not, so that's good. For Rogue, from what I understand, this is a small assassination rogue buff. With the rupture damage up, Ribs and Tempest damage up, Undemise damage up. I don't think you play Arterial Precision, unless I'm wrong about that. Outlaw, I don't think this is going to matter at all. Sub Rogue, from what I understand, this is actually a nerf overall. Their all damage increased by 10%, but their tier set was like insanely OP. So now it's a bit more normalized. From what I understand, it's like 1.5% loss single target, a little bit more than that AoE, but yeah. Shaman, all healing increased by 4%. They kind of needed it. Affliction Lock is getting some pretty big buffs here. I think Affliction Lock may be the better Warlock spec now in keys. I'm not 100% sure. I'm not a Warlock main, but we will do a log review shortly. Warrior, all damage reduced by 5%. Kind of sad that Fury catches a stray here since they already weren't looking that good in my opinion. Arms was actually looking very strong, but this will, bring it back down in line to where Warrior DPS usually is, I guess. Mythic Plus. So the log review for Aflock, I believe it's this Cinder Remetery. The Flame Plate Aflock here. If we look at enemy damage taken, by the way, LaFlame had PI in this key. Enemy damage taken of Careless Hobgoblin. So he's topping by a mile. By the way, Ret, for people asking why I put Ret lower than it appears on overall, this is why. Lower than the tank on prio damage. F2E, another prio mob. This is kind of a weird one. The next section has Venture Co. Honey Harvester. Flame on top, then me, and then the other DPS. So yeah, Aflock is pretty good overall, and very, very good priority damage from what I've seen. So I think Aflock is pretty good. As for the actual tier list, here we go. This is where I'm at right now. Prot Pally and EDH, both kind of at the top. It kind of depends what your group is gated by. Like if a tank is having trouble surviving, then VDH is God King of survivability. They still have pretty good interrupts, but they don't have Blessing of Sacrifice, Avenger's Shield, Spell Ward, etc. that Prot Pally does have. I would say both are kind of good. The other thing is VDH's prio damage, I don't know if you're looking at this log, is extremely strong with Wounded Quarry. That's not getting nerfed by that much, like 20% to Wounded Quarry. So they're still going to be doing like your average DPS's damage to the prio target, which is really good to bring to your group. Fire Mage, in my opinion, is the standout spec for top level keys. In Pugs, I would say it's going to be a little bit worse because they're not going to have certain conditions, such as like they might not be able to be combusting off cooldown, which is really bad for the current build. They might not have power infusion. They might not have chaos brand, etc. Might be like a newer player playing Fire Mage. So I would say that for organized play, Fire Mage is definitely the S tier, but for Pugs, maybe not as valuable. Disc Priest, we already talked about. In my opinion, if Mindbender is still 30 seconds, this is where they're at. Better than the other healers, but not by much. If Mindbender's cooldown is longer than that, then they will be, probably B+ or A. Ellie Shaman, I have had the chance to play with a bit more, or see a bit more. I think it deserves a spot in A+. Moonkin also deserves a spot in A+. There are some rumors that Moonkin single target is not that great. However, I think if their single target stays really bad, or actually is really bad, it'll get buffed. Because usually classes that underperform a single target get buffed because of the raid. Warlocks, I would say, are performing pretty good in Mythic Plus. A+ tier for these two. Demon Lock honestly could probably be there, but I needed to put it. I have too many specs in A+, otherwise it makes a second row. So I'm putting it here. Also, I haven't seen that many people play Demo, so it's hard to really say exactly where it belongs. Shadow Priest, I think belongs in A+ tier, assuming that the patch notes are an actual buff, small buff to Shadow Priest. And with Disc Priest being, maybe not required in every key, Shadow Priest is getting some more stonks. DM Hunter, I'm putting in A+. Possible that it deserves an A, but I think especially at the start of the season, DM Hunter being really easy to play and get your damage off is going to be pretty important, so I'm keeping them in A+. Feral Druid, putting in A+ for now. I think the tier set the buffs made them stronger, obviously. Also, the lack of an AUG is also going to be pretty good for them. It's 3 DPS in the key now. Frosty K, we already talked about, A+. Enhanced Shaman, I'm putting in A+. Shaman utility is kind of a miss this season, but Enhanced Shaman damage, especially Totemic, it seems, is pretty good. And the Shaman buff is still nice, so A+. Havoc, not the best on overall, but still one of the best priority damage dealers. So we're leaving them in A+ as well. For A tier, Blood Decay, not really changed. In my opinion, there are no keys that you cannot survive as Blood Decay right now. There's no luck key level where Blood Decay cannot survive and like VDH or Paladin can survive. It just might not be as consistent, especially if the player is not as comfortable with Blood Decay. So I'm putting it in A tier. This was kind of true in War Within also at the start until Prot Paladin raised every key level by like 3. So I think Blood Decay deserves a spot in A tier. Other heals, Resto Druid and Mistweaver, I think, are the front runners after Disc Priest. As for which one's better, I don't know. Don't ask me. Left to right does not matter, as you can see. Frost Mage, I think, is pretty okay, but not as good as Fire. Maybe better in pug scenarios, who knows. Demolock actually seemed pretty good when I played with it, but there's not really enough data to put it higher than A, in my opinion. Armswear would have been an A+, but it got a 5% nerf, so we're leaving it an A. Rogues, I think, are in a tough spot right now. I think it'll be playable, especially early in the season, but it's hard for me to justify that in a organized group when Feral Druid exists. I feel like Feral Druid is just Rogue plus Mark of the Wild. Windwalker, I'm putting in A tier. They are missing some uncapped DPS, but their low target cleave is very good, so A tier. Unholy and Ret kind of are missing priority damage / single target, or one of those, which is very valuable in Mythic Plus. They do show up on the overall damage meter because they have really good AoE damage, but they're like low target cleave / single target, not good, so plus. Guardian got a damage buff, but I still wouldn't put it in A tier. They basically only provide Mark of the Wild and random Druid things to the group, but they don't really have any specific Guardian Druid utility that puts them up higher than that, in my opinion. So I'm putting them in B tier. Damage, or B plus rather. Damage still not as good, I think, as the top 3 also, or even the bottom 2, to be honest. Brew and Warrior, I think, are good damage-wise, and they can survive the keys. The only thing with them is that these keys are going to be really hard for the healer, and adding an extra person that needs healing on certain pulls is not going to be what you want in high keys. So I'm putting them in the B tier. Pres Evoker stonks are actually kind of up since the Aug Evoker nerf, but healing-wise, I think it's going to be kind of tough for Pres Evoker since a lot of fights have some certain positional requirements that make it very difficult to play Pres Evoker. I'm sure the top Pres Evokers will definitely make it work, but especially if you're like first timing a healer, it's going to be really hard to play Pres Evoker, in my opinion. Resto Shaman probably needed more than a 4% healing buff. Their damage breakdown looks really sad right now, with Acid Rain being like 60% of their damage, so hopefully they increase the damage of some single target skills, make up for it. Fury Warrior got a nerf for no reason. I think it already wasn't very good, so we're putting in B tier. And Aug Evoker is just straight up dead, according to everyone, so it's in the B tier for now. For the rest, obviously no real data. There are some rumors that Holy Priest might be okay. HPAL, I think, needed more than what it got, and I haven't seen the rest of these in a real key yet. As always, here's a reminder: at the beginning of the season, class balance is usually pretty good. It's almost always better to bring the better player than to bring someone playing a meta class. In 0.5, however, it is very likely that game balance gets completely warped. This has happened every season since Dragonflight Season 2, so I would expect it to happen again. In this season, for now, just play what you enjoy and be ready to reroll. Alright, that's it for the tier list. So, thanks for watching.